What it does show is that maybe I was working harder, not smarter. I think people now are working smarter. They're working hard, but they figured out there's tools and technology and things out there that can make them be more efficient. So if I can learn from them and I'm willing to, love it. I do not want to stop learning because I can tell you 20 years in means absolutely nothing as a leader. 35 years in technology means nothing other than I've had a chance to experience a lot of things, but I learned so much more every single day. And I would encourage every leader to acknowledge and realize that they do not know everything. They have to be willing to listen.
Welcome to the Las Vegas IT Podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking to Martin Bennett, which I'm super excited to get to know him a little bit better. He is with Clark County, who is an IT manager, technical services. Hi, Martin. How are you?
Doing well, Shaytoya. How are you today?
Pretty good. Martin, I'd just love to get to know you a little bit better. Could you just share with us a little bit about your background?
Yes, I would say that I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. I've been in IT now for about 35 years, 25 years private sector, and I started in aerospace defense back in the mid-80s, 1980s, not 1880s. And I've been with Clark County just over 10 years now, all the time in IT. But I went into leadership about 20 years ago. And I was somewhat of a wallflower growing up in my family. And what I found really helped for me, which also has helped tremendously going through my IT journey, was working in restaurants, because you're in front of people, right? You actually have to speak with people. You can't really hide in the background. And I found that once I moved into leadership, one of the critical roles that's required is that you've got to be able to talk to people, understand people, and really work with them.
Got it. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes just within the last, you said Clark County for 10, but you've been in IT for 30 years. Did I hear you right?
About 35 years, yes. That's correct.
35
Yes,
years. So I'm sure there's been a
lots
lot
of
of
changes.
changes. What
Yeah.
are some of the changes that you've seen just in the last even 10 years?
10 years, the importance of security operations. Now we look at AI as like the new buzzword, right? So everyone wants to use that. And the trick with that one is the genie's out of the bottle. So you kind of have to figure out, where do you apply it and how do you apply it? And also, if you're going to use it, you have to be very certain and sure that as you use it, the results you can validate. It's trust but verify. You have to be able to do that. So I think that's a big thing. Just for example, the personal computers. We went from mainframes to Apple devices and smaller devices. Now your phone can do pretty much anything you want. In fact, a lot of people use just the phone, perhaps use a laptop, maybe a desktop, depending on whether they're working at home or they're not. And then I'll bring up remote work. I mean, just since COVID and post-COVID, we're 5 years in now. Look at the tremendous changes that companies have had to make. Look at the tremendous changes that individuals have had to make around the family structure. When you're working remote and you're working at home and you may have dogs barking or younger children, you may have a spouse that's working remote as well. How do you identify and define who gets which workspace? Who's on a conference call when somebody has to be making dinner? Are you working with, for example, others that are in different time zones? How do you accommodate for that? And then I think the most important thing, which also kind of goes into the management of people and leadership of people, is how do you shut that off? When you drive into work, you leave, you drive home. But when you're working remote, you close the door if you have an office. If you don't have an office, maybe it's the kitchen table, maybe it's a little bar area, maybe it's even sitting outside in an indoor-outdoor area. How do you now change that from, well, gee, I was working in this environment today, to, well, now let's go ahead and play, and let's go enjoy the pool, or let's have dinner. I think different challenges, right? And I think seeing all those things, working from an environment from many years ago as a baby boomer to now we've got Gen Z and even, Gen A and B next, very different. I was not brought up in technology, kind of going back to your first question. So going to have technology now as somebody that, your 2-year-old can use a device. And they've already figured out how to play around with it and access what they want to access. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like learning things. I mean, I work remote most of the time, so I totally understand. And then with COVID and all that good stuff. And then with your current position, like what does it look like day to day?
Day to day, lots of meetings, sadly. That's part of the business though, is that I'm in a role of decision making. So I'm looking more at the strategic direction of my teams rather than perhaps some of the tactical decisions. Although it's interesting because besides the meetings, that's the great thing about IT is that it's never the same every day. You walk into something completely different. I'll use this morning as an example. We're setting up working with the marriage bureau and setting up the Valentine's Day weekend, the weddings. And we have an area set up at the Harry Reid Airport. So that was a last minute setup. Normally it isn't, but there were some challenges yesterday and this morning, and we had that. So we had to make sure that was up and running. Other days it could be just, might be employee training, mentoring. It's really it is different every day. And I like that. I think that's just how IT generally is going to be. I mean, unless you're, sitting at a desk and you're stamping things. Now I'm dating myself again versus different projects. And sometimes your long projects, you may not have a lot of movement in those initially. But what we're also finding is that with projects, the speed of release dates and the speed and urgency of requirements from our constituents and from our county commissioners and our executive management, it's accelerating. So, we're being asked to do more things. We're asked to be smarter and more efficient. So that means we're having to think a lot more and maybe think, I hate to use that line, think outside the box, but we do that quite often. I have great teams that work for me that have helped move me along in all my career, all the places I've been. So I try to stay out of their way.
Got
That's
it.
really what I try to do. I'm there for them. And I know we'll talk about that perhaps a little bit later on this conversation, but I really try to stay out of their way.
Got it. And that's one of the biggest things that I've learned in leadership, had to learn. You said to pretty much think outside of the box. Do you feel like AI has helped employees think out of the box?
It's starting to. I think for us, because we're usually not one of the early adopters being in the public sector, we really like to see what the private sector is doing. We're starting to see that though. It does help, but once again, I'll go back to that trust but verify. So one still has to have the knowledge that this is going on, and the answer that you may receive might be, well, that sounds really great, but I'm not certain that's, maybe theoretical, but can we actually implement something like that? And I think there are other things that you have to continue to keep in mind: budgets, staff, staff availability, and staff knowledge, skills, and expertise. It may be a phenomenal plan that an AI generated response comes out, but it may not be one that you can actually use because you don't have all those pieces in place. Once again, theoretical versus what's practical. And then what are all the other projects that are ongoing? And then finally, maybe most importantly, what are the priorities of those?
Got it. And as you said, also having the knowledge behind it. So I get it. And then what are some of the biggest, you've been doing this for quite a while, but what are some of the biggest IT challenges you and your team face in the public sector?
Well, we're paid by the constituents. We're paid with taxes. We want to make sure we're doing the job that they expect of us. And oftentimes, as you know, with IT, it's always behind the scenes. We're usually a cost center. We spend money. We don't necessarily bring money in immediately. So it's not like I have a gaming machine. I put money in, money comes back out. With IT, oftentimes we're given money to put into it, but we don't necessarily cause it to come back out through IT. So I think one of the challenges is when we're asking for new projects or requested to do new projects, the justifications of the cost. Well, what is that going to look like? Well, for somebody that is, say, logging in and going to Clark County's website and they want to, say, pay a bill, maybe quarterly taxes, maybe they'll see that there's been an upgrade. Now I can do that with my credit card or debit card or PayPal or perhaps Bitcoin or something like that. So they may see, wow, that's different than last time because last quarter I could only use, for example, a credit card. So that's where our constituents will see that type of benefit, but they don't understand that there may be millions of dollars behind the scenes spent to actually implement that and test.
Got it.
And then the other thing is, I mean, there are a couple things obviously, but I think one of the other important things is keeping the staff motivated to execute and make sure that they're receiving the proper training, tools, technology. That's what we as leaders are supposed to do. Is we want to make sure that if it's a new system, new software, new process, that they're trained appropriately if they're not aware of how to do it. So we don't just throw it out there and hope for the best, right? That's not what our customers, I would say, are expecting. They expect, excellence, and I do as well, as much as we can do it. In the private sector, flipping it over a little bit, if you don't execute well, you're out of business. Your product doesn't sell, you're out of business. If you have a poor strategic plan from the executives and you don't have funding, you're out of business.
Understood. And then, you did mention your team. What are some of the things that you guys could do or that you do to make sure that you do have the right trainings in place? So when these new things do come out, you guys know exactly what's going on.
It's interesting you bring that up because we at the county offer quite a bit of training opportunities, not only self-trained, but we also have consultants that will come in. We also have a lot of opportunities to go to like CES. We have very specific Microsoft learning sessions that are available to us, Microsoft credits. We work with a number of different vendors that provide that type of training, which we also say, because I'm on the support side of things, it's great when the honeymoon's over after the launch happens and everyone's happy. That's when things usually start breaking. So as we always are concerned about what's the support contracts and the maintenance and the licensing and the training, specifically the training, are for any products that are usually brought in-house. So we do make sure that is one of our priorities, is that you're bringing in a new product. We want to be able, using that old analogy, we want to learn how to fish. We have to be able to do this on our own. And my staff is very excited about getting new opportunities. They're IT people. We like neat stuff, right? Cool stuff. What's out there?
Got it. No, I get it. And then as you say, what's out there? What are some of the technology trends that you guys are currently, if you can talk about them, but what are some of the technology trends that you guys have that you're currently working on?
Well, a lot of it's on the security side. There are a lot of different security solutions, so we're narrowing down what's available, what we can use, and helping our end users. And when I talk about end users, not only our constituents, but we support our internal staff, internal employees. We're almost 40 departments, 10,000 employees, spread out over 8,200 square miles, approximately the fifth largest county in the country, and people forget that. So we're in central IT, so we support a lot of different things. So we have to be a little cautious, but we know that, once again, AI is big, security is huge, and really it's taking products that are out there and finding the best ones that are going to work for our environment. Our environment, because I wanted to mention those statistics, is different than, say, a smaller county or a smaller city, or it could be even like a private sector where they say, well, this is what we're doing. We have, 50 employees. We're all using Apple devices. We're all using iPads. We're all using the same thing. Here, because we have so many different departments that do so many different things, we try to keep the technology as common and similar across the board. We really try to standardize where we can, but that's a challenge for us too.
Understood. And I did not know that it was so many employees and how big it was actually. So that's awesome to know. And one of the things that you did mention to me during the time that you were, signing up for our podcast is adaptive leadership. Can you define what that means to an IT setting?
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting because it applies to a lot of different settings. They're really, I'd say, like there, and I am plagiarizing here a little bit, but there are really like three leadership dimensions, and it's directive, supportive, and inclusive. And the directive is one that I'll say was probably what I was working with when I was in the mid '80s, working in aerospace defense. Former military people, very, this is how it's done, or we all die type of atmosphere. With the supportive, you're really there for kind of helping everybody out. And the inclusive is where you have experienced teams that have a lot of knowledge and they're highly motivated. And as a leader, you want to make sure that you kind of use that. So that's really where there are a number of other explanations or definitions, I should say, excuse me, for adaptive leadership. But what I found is the longer I'm in this, the more I realize I don't know how much I don't know about leadership. It's hard to put people in buckets, right? Everybody is different. Everyone has different values, goals, morals, just go down the list. And the trick is, as a leader, is finding out what works for different people for different situations. That's really what adaptive leadership is that you recognize that you have a team of individuals. They may not all go along the same path as you do. I mean, ideally for me, it's like, well, I love having people that think and act like me that I can manage because, like, well, I know how I like to be managed, so I would think that's the same. So I had that thought for a little while. Then I had some bumps in the road actually early on in my leadership career. And that was actually probably one of the best things that have happened. It's like, well, no, you need to look at people differently. You have to be able to adapt to the environment, whether it's public sector, whether it's private sector, large companies, small companies, the velocity of the business. And by doing that, you just get more comfortable with, okay, we're in a stressful situation. We need to complete this project. Okay, guess what? In that case, I may need to be more directive. This is going to be authoritarian type. It's like, well, we have to do this and it has to be done by now. However, if we're looking, for example, at new technology for a department that needs a new project, it might be more inclusive. I'm going to ask not only my senior people, but I'm also going to ask the most junior people. Interestingly enough, sometimes the best ideas you get are from people that are not familiar with your technology at all. They don't know anything, for example, about the county or the business you work at. They may be a new employee. If you're not willing to listen to their ideas and say, that's a great idea. I like people to come to me with ideas and they disagree with me, but I want them to come to me with ideas, right? It's great because you know the process better, you know the technology better than I will. That's not my role, but my role is to help kind of figure that out. But you've got to come to me with a reason why and have a solution. I know a lot of people use that line, but it's really true. I love it when people come say, Martin, that's not a great idea, but here's what I think will work. And once again, it can be from somebody that just started with a company, or it could be somebody that's been with the county in this example, 25 years. That means they're thinking about it, which means I'm doing something right as a mentor and a leader, and that people are willing to be comfortable to tell me when I'm wrong. Can't be the emperor with no clothes. Once
Right.
again, I'm dating myself, right?
No, you're fine. I think I read that book as a child, which I think is really, really important, especially as a leadership, because the truth is we possibly don't know everything. So just having full understanding of, and I also believe that it's important that I do get outsiders because a lot of times they have knowledge that I might have not even thought of. So thank you for sharing that, Martin. Um, and then how have you used adaptive leadership to navigate challenges in your career?
I've used it a lot more, I think, since I became a leader. I didn't recognize that I wasn't trying to. I had to realize I couldn't please everybody. I guess that's probably the first lesson, is that as a leader, I could not please everybody. And for a while I was trying to do that. And then I recognized not everybody wants that. Not everybody, sadly, Sometimes you have to help manage people into the direction they should go. And sometimes that may mean that they're not with the company that they're currently with and working for you. So that's part of that adaptive leadership, where sometimes you have to have those, they call it the crucial conversations. Sometimes you actually have to have that with people. And it's taken me a very long while. And I still struggle with that because my mindset, I'm not wired that way. So I've adjusted, try to use different types of management styles where I think it's appropriate. But I also recognize, as I mentioned earlier, everybody's different. It's hard to read books and put people into buckets based off of those decisions or suggestions that books make. They're great resources out there, and they're a lot more available with the internet availability as well. But you still have to rethink it and say, well, that's textbook, but is that really going to be the reality that you need to apply?
Understood. So thank you for sharing that. And then can you share an example of a time when you had to adapt your leadership style to address a specific issue?
I've had a couple of different examples. Let's see, let me use one where I had an individual that I tried everything. I was trying to find something for this employee to try to find out what their what was their career plans? What were their career goals? Where would they like to be? I said, I was here to help them out, whatever it would take, training, tools, as I mentioned earlier, technology, making the role easier. And it just didn't work. And I recognized that going through that process and really trying to be a hands-on managing it was taking a lot of my time, and which was I was okay with. The problem was it was taking time away from the rest of my staff. Which so I was essentially doing, by changing my style to address one person, I was doing a disservice to the rest of my employees, and they could see that, and they recognized that I wasn't providing what they were looking for. Once again, some were like, I'm self-sufficient. I know where I want to go. And then others like, well, where's Martin? Oh, he's busy managing, handling an employee challenge. I won't say issue, I'll say challenge. Because a challenge is a good thing, because sometimes when you have a challenge, you can it's like, oh, well, I think we can figure out a positive. And it actually was resolved. And I think in the long run, it was probably for the best. And if anything, I have the scar tissue, sadly, but it's also it's part of that learning phase. Not everything is going to be puppy dogs and rainbows and unicorns, especially in leadership. I mean, in any job, it doesn't really matter. In whatever one's career is, it's never going to be that way. But as long as you're able to learn from that and hopefully take that experience and then apply it to a certain extent, then I think I think as a leader, you've done a good job. I mean, that's the best you can hope for. I wasn't
Got
born with a leader hat on, right? It's like, oh,
right.
Martin's going to be a leader for, the rest of his career.
Understood. And that's the only way you can grow, which I think is super, super important. And then Martin, what does your mentorship play in IT, or and why is it so important?
I do it every day. And the reason I so love being a mentor is because my story at the end of my career is not going to be how much money did I make? What title do I have? How many houses do I have? How many cars do I have? How many trips? And I could go down the list. It's like, did I make a difference in other people's lives to get them in the career that they want to get into? That's what's so important about being a mentor. And young, old, it doesn't matter. We all have aspirations. We all have drives, desires. When I was earlier in my career, it was, I was driven by the title and the money. But as you go through the decades and you go through the years of working, you start figuring out, well, what is important. So I try to impart some of that messaging with my staff. And I would say it's every day. Well, I have some people that are maybe newer in leadership. So I try to guide them through. They're going to hit the potholes. They're going to hit the walls, but I try to give them some ideas. At least I try to ask them to think about the other side of things. Maybe that's not the answer, but what if you reverse it? Or maybe you ask staff to do this. And I encourage them to become mentors as well. I think that's a huge part of this. It's paying it forward. I know that's a term that's often overused, but that is so important. I was very blessed, and I have been very blessed in my career to have some mentors in my life that I still have that were able to help me give me an answer that maybe I didn't want to hear. And that's really what mentorship is as well, right? It's not just you're doing great, keep it up. Sometimes it's like, well, I wouldn't suggest doing that. That doesn't seem like a smart thing, but here's what you might want to look into. So once again, the mentorship it's constant. And sometimes I've got people here, as I mentioned earlier, about the youngest people or the newest people or the ones still in college, they're almost mentoring me, saying, well, this is what's going on. I'm in a different generation. That's a very important piece of it. You look at millennials, which is the largest generation, and then Gen X is right behind it with the number of people in the workforce. They're the way they were brought up, almost all technology. I mean, you look at what it is, and I have to accept that I can be mentored by them because they might say, well, you could use this tool and it will save you 20 minutes a day. That's fantastic.
Mhm. Was that something hard to learn at first?
For me, no. I would say I'll go back to working in restaurants for so many years that I did around so many different people, working in lots of different industries with a lot of great people. Like I said, jack of all trades, master of none has really been able to help me adapt easier, I think, than a lot of people that are the baby boomers. And that's where we're seeing that challenge is like we still have a lot of baby boomers working in the environment. Their mindset is not the same. I worked 2 and 3 jobs when I was going through college. That's not how it works anymore. Does that mean I'm better because I worked more jobs? No, that has nothing to do with it. But what it does show is that maybe I was working harder, not smarter. I think people now are working smarter. They're working hard, but they figured out there's tools and technology and things out there that can make them be more efficient. So if I can learn from them and I'm willing to, love it. I mean, I do not want to stop learning because I can tell you 20 years in means absolutely nothing as a leader. 35 years in technology means nothing other than I've had a chance to experience a lot of things, but I learned so much more every single day. And I would encourage every leader to acknowledge and realize that they do not know everything. They have to be willing to listen.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. And then when it comes to how do you approach mentoring and developing your team members?
With my supervisors that report to me, it's a little bit easier because we have one-on-one conversations and they can go any place. Sometimes it's work, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's both. So I don't say, this is our mentoring session. You are going to listen, I'm going to mentor you. It's very organic. It's the way a lot of things should happen. If they have a question or they're questioning why I did something, made a decision, to me, I consider that almost a mentoring. I don't say, hey, we're mentoring right now. I'll say, this is why I made this decision. And sometimes I'll make it and they'll say, well, why didn't you do this? And I could say, you know what, that's a great idea. And in my mind, I'm thinking they just mentored me. Once again, it's always being willing or be willing to listen to your staff. And sometimes, once again, I can't say, oh, I did 12 hours of mentoring. It's, hey, we had an opportunity to have discussions. And 10 years or 5 years from now, they may look back and say, I remember that I had that conversation with Martin and here's what came out of it. That to me is almost what I would consider a mentoring opportunity.
Got it. So you would say it's more generic, not like, oh, we're doing this training. um,
No, we have that, but it's very organic. I said I get very excited about it because to me, that is what my job is. I'm here to help guide the ship, but I'm willing to and I need to make course corrections based on what the teams are saying.
Understood. And then what advice would you give to an IT professional looking to get into leadership?
I would say have some great mentors, people that you can look up to, do some research online and do what's called informational interviews. If you know you want to go into leadership, find some people out there, not necessarily in your company or whether public or private sector, and just start questioning them. So how did you get into that? What did you find that you liked? What did you find you didn't like? What are the challenges that you're experiencing? And then you start kind of taking a look into, okay, so there are opportunities in my company to move up to maybe it's a lead. Well, does that mean you're leading a project or you're leading people? It's very different. And then you get an idea. It's like, I always thought people would work the same way I do. And then you realize early on that doesn't always work. So that's a great way to get started. And then I'm going to say, use your silver bullet sparingly, especially when you get into leadership. And what I mean by that is if something goes sideways or there's a critical decision that has to be made, sometimes you have to be that absolute ruler and make that. But you limit those because the more you do it, the more you're micromanaging, the more people stop listening to you and they go to other leaders. But I would encourage people that have a thought about doing it to investigate it and realize and recognize that you're leading other people that once again have different skill sets, morals, drives, desires. And think about, is that what you really want to, are you okay with also losing your technological background? Because that you will lose your technical skill set. It has to happen. It's very, very difficult to be able to do both great. And if you're doing everything great on the technical side as a leader of a team, you may be doing your team a disservice because you're not helping them advance and grow in what the careers that they want to do.
Got it. And so when you became a leader, was that something you struggled with in the beginning?
No, I've never been very technical, to be perfectly honest with you.
Got it.
I'm good. I'm good with understanding what the customer wants and what our end user and what the technical team and figuring out. I was a systems analyst early on, so that's really helped me well. But I found my skill set and my strengths is being able to lead people and direct them and help them and do it in a way where it comes across as, because I have a belief that I really believe in people. And it comes across that way. It's not a phony. It's not an act. I'm interested in what they do. I believe in what they do. I'm here to help them. I'm here to take the hits for them. I'm here to get them promoted up, give them the accolades. To me, leading is not difficult. But what happens is a lot of people that are great as individual contributors think, well, everyone's going to work just as well as I am. I've promoted up very high. I'm ready to lead people. It doesn't work that way. So I think you have to find what your strength is and what you've been blessed to be able to do. And for me, it truly is leading and mentoring and just helping people. And I found my best spot to be in, I guess. And I think I do a pretty good job at it. I don't know. I guess if you talk to some people that work for me, you might get a different answer. But as long as I believe it, that's all that matters, right?
Right. And then what are some of the key trends you see shaping the future for IT and the government services?
The government services, we cannot be left too far behind. So I'm going to go back to AI again and security. There are more security vulnerabilities, I think, across the board with government and public sector than maybe in the private sector. So that's definitely, if you can spell, and this is going to sound silly, I know, but if you can spell security, you can almost get a job working in security operations. Because the demand is so great, it's so difficult to find people to move into that. And then what AI is going to do, I don't think it may change jobs. And I will say it potentially could eliminate jobs. But what that, to me, instead of saying, I'm going to lose my job, what that's telling me is like, wow, I've got more opportunities to learn something new. Maybe I can become this or I can do that. And I think the younger generations and the direction that things are going is that as newer and younger employees are moving into the public sector, they want to try things. They also want to have a voice. And I'm all for that. It's great if you have a voice in decisions. But once again, there are going to be times when I'm going to say that's fantastic, but this is a direction we have to go. Once again, going back to what a leader does. But people, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, they want to have the opportunities to provide something to the organization. And I think if you do that, they have more of a belief in the organization. The remote work, I know it's going back and forth right now. You've got a lot of companies pulling it back. There, I think it's a huge value in having a balance. And I think it's gone, pendulum's gone from one side. Now it's coming back the other way. And somehow it will balance out. It has to. The world has changed. And once again, I'll go back to the baby boomers and even the millennials. It's changed for us. And we have to be comfortable with change. And we're sometimes the most difficult people to acknowledge that the work and the workforce and the environment and the world is different. We have to, if we want to be able to survive in it and not get trampled, then we need to understand and learn how to work with people that are maybe 20, 30, in my case, 40 plus years younger than me. Right? It's a challenge, but it's, once again, I like learning and I like changing and adapting. So it's fun. For me, it's fun. And it should be for leaders. It should be fun.
Got it. No, and I agree with that. You've been talking a lot about, the younger generation coming in. How do you see IT evolving in the next 5 years, particularly in government or public services?
We will be bringing more technology in. We will become more efficient. We will be able to take people that perhaps are not very technologically savvy, the ones that have been here for a while. I'll just use this for a while. And they will become more technologically savvy. So you're going to see more technology come in, but we're also going to be, I think, very good at identifying areas that we can improve it. How do we get rid of all the manual processes? Technology in government, oftentimes you see lots of red tape. And that's what we're working on too, is how do we reduce the red tape? For you, as an example, as a constituent, and you want to be, what I would want to be able to do is I want to be on a trip in the Caribbean, laying on a beach, having a cocktail, and have my phone with me and get a notification that I need to pay my water, power, quarterly taxes. I need to renew my business license. Maybe I have a license for something else. I want to be able to do it on my phone and be done. Not have to come back, not have to actually have to drive into the government center building and stand in line and write a check, or, I want to be able to do everything within like 2 minutes and it's done. So I'm not bothered. So technology has to continue to reduce the red tape here. And it is. And it will continue to do that because we also have to be very fiscally responsible. That's our responsibility for me as a county employee, for you as a non-county employee. You're paying taxes for a lot of different things. Some of that comes in to pay my salary. So am I doing a disservice to you by wasting money? No, I'm not. So how do we improve on that? So I believe our cell phone that's going to be more of a lifeblood than it is for people now. And once again, as people in the older generation start retiring out, newer generation, you're technology driven. In fact, you may not want to own a car. You may not want to own a house. You can go down the list of things. You might want services, everything, Uber's delivering everything for me, right? People use that already. So how do we improve our services for our constituents? How do we improve our services for our businesses here? So when somebody is starting up a new business, they can go, it's a one-stop shop. They go to one link and it allows them to do everything they need to get their businesses up and running. We don't want to be the hindrance for somebody starting a new idea.
Got it. And I look forward to that, Martin.
And I would say it's not the next 5 years. That's happening now. I mean, you
Awesome.
would be amazed at seeing the things that are actually happening. Because once again, technology is accelerating at such a rapid rate. The Moore's Law, it's almost out the window because what we're having trouble with is that our brains can't keep up with what's happening with technology. So it's challenging. It's challenging for private sector and public sector.
And I'm sure, I'm sure it's very challenging. And then, so what's one piece of leadership advice that has stuck with you throughout your long career?
I'm going to tell you too, because I think I deserve that because I'm old. I would say, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Allow your teams to challenge yourself and allow your teams to essentially challenge themselves and the people to challenge themselves. It's like you have to be afraid to make mistakes to learn. One of the things that I do see as a challenge in the public sector versus private is that you don't always have as many people that are willing to take chances and take risks. You have to do things outside your comfort zone. This actually, speaking with you on a podcast, is outside my comfort zone. I love talking and I love talking with people, but it's still not something that I normally like to do. I can speak in front of groups, but not necessarily big audiences. And doing something like this is outside my comfort zone, but it's great. because it gives me a chance to kind of get past that part of it. It's like, oh, I'm doing this, but I'm actually able to message my story and what I think is important. So once again, it's those two things: is you've got to be willing to take chances. You've got to be there for your people, essentially, to back them up. It's like, once again, they get the accolades, they get the promotions. Is all that stuff has helped me through my entire career. As that has happened, I've been able to promote up very successfully in different companies because of my people. It has nothing to do with what I've done. I've just make sure I'm there for them. So that was probably more than two answers. Sorry.
No, I loved it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad like this is getting out your comfort zone. Me starting the podcast was me getting out of my comfort zone. So I just love that. And then as you do more, you get better. And then so if you could go back and give your younger self a career advice, what would it be?
I think one of the first things I would say is I should have pushed myself harder at the beginning of my career. There were opportunities out there that I probably didn't try to take advantage of. Maybe I wasn't asking the right people. Maybe I didn't recognize that I needed to find some mentors. So I think that was important. Be comfortable with change. When I first started my first job, I never really thought past that, oh, I'm going to be here. And then they closed the division down and people were scattered or, were laid off essentially because there was no need for, 12,000 people scattered. So I think you have to I wish I was more acceptable to change. And I think I wish I took advantage of the people there that I think I could have learned more from and actually taken advantage of more of the training that was out there for me. Now, granted, it was very different, almost 40 years ago, but still there was opportunities out there. So these days I encourage people, don't just settle. If an opportunity comes up before you're, say, married or with a significant other, or you have children, or you get settled in and you have a chance to travel to work for a job, if it's not remote, take the opportunity. Don't limit yourself because you're limiting your capabilities. You'll never know what your capabilities are unless you actually test it. And once again, if you fail, that's okay. Just try it again, figure out a different way, find out what happened. What do I need to do to change? Who do I need to talk to? I mean, it's all our whole lives are learning experiences. We'll learn till the day we pass away. I mean, it is. So if you're comfortable with that, or if you're comfortable with it, great. If you're not comfortable with it, get comfortable because that's what life is. It is going to be challenges. You're going to have great days and bad days. You're going to have times where you think, I can't do anything. I don't know anything. You'll be surprised.
No, agreed. I agree with you 100%. So I do appreciate you sharing that with us, Martin. And then if our listeners wanted to connect with you, how do they do that?
A couple different ways. I'm on LinkedIn. And if you go to my LinkedIn page, Martin Bennett, you'll see that my photo is not the norm. It's not going to be me sitting with a suit on, which I do have photos of, but it's me on a bicycle. So there's another part of me with my other part of my life, which is not non-work related. I'm comfortable in my own skin, I'll say. So I'm not worried about if somebody sees that and said, well, they didn't use a professional photo. We wouldn't want to talk to them. So LinkedIn is one way. Also, my email address through Clark County, it's martin.bennett@clarkcountynv.gov. Also, I'm more than happy to provide my desk phone number. It's area code 702-455-3021. I would love to hear from people, good, bad. I'd love to hear if people have got some advice for me. Once again, I'm just one of millions of people out there. I've been very blessed once again in my life. I felt the passion with getting into leadership and working with people. I mentioned what my story is a little bit earlier on in our conversation. And that's kind of how I want to be remembered, I guess, if you might say that. So I'd love to hear other people's stories, love to try to help people. I try to work with people now if they're looking at changing careers or changing jobs. I try to help with that on the side as well. I said, I like people. I mean, that's part of being a leader. You better like people because they are not going to be like you. They're not going to act. They're not going to talk like you. They're not going to look like you, but you're there to help guide them to get where they want to go. That's my job. And it's not a challenge for me. I'm glad to be able to do something like this. I mean, I feel very blessed once again to be able to do something like this and offer my skills and my background, my expertise and my experience. And hopefully it helps somebody. If I'm able to change one person and help them get where they've gone, then I've done my job.
Yeah, I just love that. Well, Martin, thank you so much. I did enjoy our conversation, and we will add all the links that you did mention on the description. But today was a pleasure, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Shaytoya. I really enjoyed it. Thank you again.